bought a snowmobile 45 years ago before I was old enough to drive a car, and I've been hooked on snowmobiling ever since. Got involved with my local snowmobile club just outside of Kitchener-Waterloo, and learned that they needed a bunch of volunteers to help promote this business. Rose through the ranks, became the president of the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs in the early 90s. Moved on to become the Canadian president of the Snowmobile Council of Canada. Snowmobiling is a passion of mine, and on an annual basis I'm fortunate enough to have the time that I ride between 6,000 and 10,000 miles every winter. It's involved every aspect of my family, and I've been able to enjoy trail riding with my wife. It makes the winters pass pretty quickly.
I've been riding with Harold for over 35 years in Ontario and Quebec, and we've gotten ourselves into some crazy situations and somehow managed to get out of them. Snowmobile is something we've always done. We did it with our children when they were young, and we are looking forward to doing it with our grandchildren. This year, Harold picked up a 2006 Mini Z for our grandson Owen. He's 4. And Harold is hoping that he will enjoy it as much as he does. After all, these kids are our future in snowmobiling.
When the average sledder thinks about riding in Northern Ontario, the route most commonly thought of to get to the trails is referred to as the Highway 11 corridor. It's the most direct route north from the largest population base in the GTA and the busiest border crossings from the US. It also ends at and takes you through some of the very best riding in Ontario. So it's no surprise many southern riders or US sledders have never considered another route or region to ride in. The truth is, limiting yourself to this route north is keeping you from experiencing what we feel are some of the best, most well-kept, and most scenic trails in the entire province. No one can guarantee snow, but if you had to place your bets on where snow's likely going to be, Ontario Highlands would be a pretty safe one. They have historically got higher than average snowfalls and some of the biggest snowfalls in the province for the past 10 years. Ontario's Highland stretches from midway through Algonquin Park at the top, as far west as Huntsville, and as far south as Minden and Kinmount, and all the way east to the Ottawa Valley. The trails here are wide, they're fast, and they're impeccably kept.
We do ride our machines in Kitchener-Waterloo, and that's where we are from, but we really love driving our machines up in Bancroft.
We've cottaged in the Bancroft region for the last 30 years, and the town of Bancroft has really come a long way in terms of opening their arms and welcoming snowmobilers. They've built a snowmobile-specific bridge across the York River, allowing easy access to all the motel accommodations, restaurants, gasoline stops, and they're embracing snowmobiling. It's great to see.
Bancroft is really only an hour from my home in Minden, and it's a pretty common day's ride for me. Minden to Bancroft for lunch and back, that's what we do. Today we're going to start our ride in Bancroft and head much farther north towards Pembroke. So I'm going to meet Harold and Faye in Bancroft, and we're going to leave from there. I've known Harold for the better part of my life, and I've ridden with Harold more times than I can even count. Harold is well known for getting where he's going. He's just not well known for taking the shortest route to get there.
Bancroft to Pembroke is a very doable one-day trip, although it's a pretty long one day. We're fortunate on this trek to be able to break it up into 2, and we're going to be staying overnight at what normally is our lunch stop at Spectacle Lake Lodge to break the trail in half. It's about 125 miles to get there from Bancroft with some incredible scenery on the way. The ride from Bancroft to Barry's Bay has such a variety of trail, from rail lines to open access logging roads to some tight bush opportunities. And the local clubs really are dedicated to a routine of making sure these trails are groomed to perfection, and we get an abundance of snow as well, so it's a very enjoyable ride.
I really do enjoy riding on these trails. I really don't like riding on bumpy trails 90 miles in a day. The scenery up here is just beautiful, and it's really only a few hours from home, and when we get here, we enjoy the trails. We need to do this at least once a month. I know Harold likes to do it more, just so we don't go crazy.
Harold's well known for putting on big miles in short periods of time, which is why I was really surprised when partway through the ride he pulls off the trail into a rest area. But pulling up beside him, I saw why. The route we were riding travels up alongside the Madawaska River and offers some incredible views of the rushing water. This particular overlook is interesting because of how the ice forms on the rocks. It's quite beautiful and was well worth the time spent to check it out.
I love stopping at this spot. The view is absolutely beautiful, and it's just the perfect distance from the cottage. You can take a break and then head to the next destination, which will be, I believe, Spectacle Lake today. And it's just a wonderful spot for taking pictures.
After this waterfall, we've got about another 25 miles to go to get to our destination at Spectacle Lake Lodge. Again, rail line and great forest access logging roads. It truly is a great ride with some beautiful scenic vista outlooks along the way.
Through this trip, I've been so impressed by how these trails are maintained by the local clubs. We may have been riding midweek, but we were literally the first sleds on fresh groomed trails pretty much all the way into Spectacle Lake Lodge. I've stayed at Spectacle Lake Lodge a few times in the past, and this place caters to pretty much any outdoor enthusiast, from skiers and snowshoers, hikers, ice fishermen, ATVers, and of course, us snowmobilers. If a rustic but nice atmosphere is what you're after, I'd say Spectacle Lodge is where you need to stay. Accommodations at Spectacle Lake include the main lodge itself that has some normal style hotel rooms in it, and then the cabins. All accommodations are very well appointed and include things like fireplaces and big king-size beds, and the food in the main lodge is just spectacular.
Riding as much as I do, I've seen all sorts of snowmobile accommodation, some pretty nice, but some absolutely awful. Spectacle Lake Lodge is one of those locations that really understands snowmobiling and is a place I'm real happy to bring my wife to. They pamper you, great food, great accommodation. We've been able to stay overnight at Spectacle as opposed to just having lunch there. So the ride from Spectacle onto Pembroke is about 100 miles, and it's going to be an easy three-quarter day trip, 3.5 to 4 hours into Pembroke.
Since Spectacle Lake Lodge is right on the trail, we got an early start in the morning. The route to Pembroke is only another 90 or 100 miles or so, and this section of the trip consists of more abandoned rail lines and logging roads with some bush trails mixed in. The trails in the Ontario Highlands regions are wide and fast. Signage is excellent, and the OFSC mapping of this area is also top-notch, so you never feel like you're lost or you don't know where you are. And this gives added confidence to riders unfamiliar with this area to know that they're not going to be lost or get lost on the trail or not know where they are at any time.
I really like this part of the trip. I love the fact that the trails are nice and wide, and I have the opportunity to actually look at all the beautiful scenery. This trail runs along the Algonquin Park, and the scenery is as wild as you can get. It's not uncommon to see deer or any other type of wild animal any day.
You know, the trip from Spectacle Lake, Barry's Bay onto Pembroke is, as I say, it's just under 100 miles. You got to make sure your machines are topped up with fuel, have your spare parts, spare belts, because there really is very little in between Barry's Bay and Pembroke. You've got a one-stop deal. Great scenery, a great trip. The geography of the Barry's Bay to Pembroke trip starts off as pretty tight bush riding, opens up into some logging roads, but as you get closer to Pembroke, it's probably the biggest rail line I've seen. The trail has to be groomed 40 feet wide with big high trestles and really opens up into the Ottawa Valley coming into to Pembroke. A little busy on the weekend, a little more traffic, so hence riding during the week is probably your best bet on heading to Pembroke.
Like the town of Bancroft, the town of Pembroke does an excellent job with their trails. Around the town, the trails are tighter with a mix of farmers' fields, rail lines, ditches, and typical bush trails. Signage around the town is also excellent, which is very important because there are physically more trails around town, so having adequate signage means you won't get lost on your way to the hotel. In Pembroke, we always stay at the Best Western for a couple reasons. It's clean, it's got a big, well-lit parking lot, but most importantly, it's directly off the trail and has a gas station right across the road. The ride from Barry's Bay to Pembroke was pretty easy, so we got in really good time mid-afternoon, and that gave us lots of time to get unpacked, cleaned up, and then get out for a decent dinner in town.
Having grown up in Pembroke quite a few years ago, Pembroke has grown to embrace snowmobiling. It's a great town, restaurants, accommodation, everything you could possibly want. A real comfortable stop on your stay, particularly if you're going around Algonquin Park. Depending where you're arriving from, Pembroke could also be a great destination to start your trip from, in that you could do this same trip that we've done in reverse, back to Bancroft, including Whitney, doing any number of circles out of the Pembroke area.
The routes south and northwest of Pembroke are part of Ontario's Round Algonquin Park, or RAP Tour. It's one of Ontario's most famous multi-day trips, and it's one I did with a few friends a few seasons ago. Our ride started at our home base in Minden, Ontario. Two of my closest friends, Stefan and Joel, and I set out to conquer the 3 to 4 day ride all the way around Ontario's largest provincial park. The first leg of the trip took us to Pembroke along the same route that Harold and Faye and I traveled. But after our stay overnight in Pembroke, the guys on the trip took off above the park towards Mattawa. This trail follows a pipeline cut out of the forest that runs very much in parallel to Highway 17. To say this trail is wide and fast would be a humongous understatement. It's easily one of the best, most fun trails I've ever ridden in this province. Since there really is only one trail that heads to Mattawa, the only thing you have to worry about once you're on that trail is making sure you get to one of the gas stops that's scattered along the route. During our ride, we found a little gem hidden along the banks of the Ottawa River that made for a perfect rest and warm-up stop, but that break was pretty short-lived. To get all the way across the top of the park to Mattawa in one day takes a bit of a commitment. You really don't have a lot of time to waste, so Steph and Joel and I jumped back on our sleds and put on as many miles as fast as we could. Our ride across the top of the park as part of the RAP Tour highlighted one particular thing in my mind when it comes to riding in Ontario. The trails here all seem to go somewhere. Some places are farther away from others, but no matter where you ride from, you always have a place to go. Harold and Faye and I chose to ride the Ontario Highlands regions, and the trails here proved to be among the top 5 best I've ever ridden. It's also an area I typically would not think to ride other than as part of a larger tour like the RAP, because it's just a little farther off the beaten path than what I'm used to. But over the past 2 days, I learned a very important lesson. If Ontario is your home, or it's where you ride from most, you really owe it to yourself to mix up where you ride. Try a different region or different trails, leave from a different town. You might just be missing some of the best trails you'll ever ride.